Hi, grade 7. So, finally, this is your last parlay. Yay! You guys made it. Oh, my squeaky voice. So, you're here with Miss Dominique and.
Mr. Yeoman.
And me, Mr. Hanson, no camera this time because I am doing the recording. I just want to put that out there.
So, today you're going to have two videos, two parts. So, we're going to be talking about, in the first one, about all the other provinces that joined in Confederation to make Canada the country you see today. So, that's chapter 11, part A that we're going to be talking about right now. So, in the first one, you guys have already talked about this in chapter 8, but it's Welcome to the Dominion of Canada on July 1st, 1867, which is Confederation Day, with Sir John Macdonald and the Fathers of Confederation. And the four provinces that joined at this time were only Ontario, Quebec, so Upper and Lower Canada, Nova Scotia, and New Brunswick. So these four provinces all joined to make what is now today Canada, back then the Dominion of Canada. And as you guys can see on the little map here, it's only in the eastern part of the country. So Ontario wasn't the size it is right now, neither was Quebec. So with these four provinces joining, this is what we know of Canada right now. So as we keep moving forward, we're going to see all the incentives and promises that were given to all the other provinces to join Confederation to make this country from sea to sea like Sir John Macdonald had wanted.
All right, so moving on, the first province to really be created was Manitoba. Now, I say this after the four initial ones, just so you guys don't get too confused here. So, Manitoba was a huge talking point for us during the Métis unit. Okay, we know that it was created as a way as a compromise between the Canadian government led by John A. Macdonald and Louis Riel and the Métis people. Unfortunately, I'm not going to be going too much into that, but Manitoba was created. It had two different language schools, and they were the first ones to join Confederation after Confederation was made. The biggest reason why Manitoba was created was to set it aside so that we can create the railway that would be connecting Canada from coast to coast.
The next colony that joined was British Columbia in 1871. Now, British Columbia has been a colony at this point for a long time. It started as actually two colonies, Vancouver and British Columbia, and they eventually joined together to become one. And for a long time, they were not part of Canada. They were just their own colony. Throughout their history, before they joined Canada, at first they were there was a fur trading economy, much like we learned about in Eastern Canada. Eventually, there was a huge gold rush in northern British Columbia and into the Yukon up north, which brought huge amounts of settlers into the British Columbia colony. Eventually, the gold rush ended, and the colony itself was left with sort of a collapsed economy and a ton of debt. Okay. And so in the late 1860s, John A. Macdonald saw an opportunity to bring British Columbia into the Dominion of Canada. And so they began negotiating with each other. And eventually a deal was struck in which the Canada would assume all of the debt of British Columbia. And also Canada would agree to build a railway all the way across the continent to reach British Columbia, connecting the two parts of the country, the two halves of the country. At this time, Canada owns all of Rupert's land that connects the two, all that huge piece of land in between Quebec, Ontario, and British Columbia. But to make something out of it, and to make it worth British Columbia coming into Confederation, they need to build that railway all the way across the continent to connect the two colonies. But in the end, in 1871, British Columbia agrees, signs, and joins the nation of Canada.
So then we had the next province, which is Prince Edward Island. And if you guys don't know where Prince Edward Island is or what it looks like, I pointed to it on the map. It's this small little red dot right here. So it's a very small island. And it was back then as well. So the first time In 1867, when the four provinces came together for Confederation, PEI declined the offer. And the reason why they declined is because they were afraid that their voices, their maritime voices, were going to get lost in Confederation because their province was so small. So their representation by population at that time, so red by pop, would not have been big enough to actually make it worth them joining Confederation. They would have lost their voice. So in 1873, Sir John MacDonald came to them and offered a secondary deal and said, I will give you this many things if you agree to join Confederation. And the reason why that they went at that time is because it was being, like, word was being thrown around that the United States was about to do the same thing. So Sir John MacDonald really wanted that province to be a part of Canada and not have anything in between that was a U.S. territory. So the things that PEI were given and offered was that all of its debts to Britain were going to be paid off. So anything that it owed to Britain, everything that PEI had was rented as farmland. So I'll go on to this in the next part. But Canada offered to pay all the debts from all the farmland in PEI to Britain and buy the farmland for the farmers and then give it to the farmers as a gift, so that they could stop renting the land that they were farming and own it. So that was a really nice thing. They also decided to pay the province an annual sum of money, so once a year they'd get a small sum of money. They were going to take over the cost of building the island railway. So that railway was only within the province. It was very small, but it helped transfer resources from one side of the island to the other. So by building that railway and paying for the cost of it, PEI was taking on way less debt at this point. They also decided at that time to provide a year-round steamboat so they could connect to the mainland. It's now a ferry. And they are going to give PEI, this was a big thing, 6 MPs in the House of Commons. Because technically what they could have had was maybe only 1. So then in 1873, Prince Edward Island joined Confederation.
So, next one up was actually 2 provinces that would actually be joining Canada in 1905, which includes everyone's favorite province, Alberta, and Saskatchewan. So, the biggest issue for them joining Confederation was, would they be 1 province or 2 provinces? Now, Wilfrid Laurier, important name here, this is the new Prime Minister of Canada. Johnny MacDonald is unfortunately no longer with us. He argued that 1 big province would be really hard to manage and too powerful. So, 2 provinces were made. The first schools in the prairies were actually French Catholic schools, which sounds kind of surprising because when you think about when they're expanding westwards, we talk about like it's English people. But believe it or not, some of the first settlers in Alberta and Saskatchewan were actually French communities. Canada paid each province $1 million to keep control of the land and give it to newcomers. And even harder to believe was that Alberta and Saskatchewan did not own the land for at least another 25 years. It wasn't until 1930 that Alberta and Saskatchewan actually got a say over their land. The Alberta Act was created to give a guarantee of separate schools where children could study in English or in French, but French would be instructed for 1 hour a day at minimum. So even to this day, even in Edmonton, we still have like different types of schools depending on language, which did promote bilingualism. The railway was promised to southern points, later realizing that the farmland in the south was not very fertile. So when we think about the prairies, we think about land being really good for farming, but unfortunately, the southern part was not so great. And later on, it was directed more towards Edmonton.
And then finally, Chris, I think you should mute.
Mute?
Yeah, you do.
Why do I have to mute?
Because you're getting a lot of echo.
Ooh, that ain't good. Is that better?
You didn't mute. There you go. Okay, so Newfoundland and Labrador, 1949. So after the Great, so as you can see, Newfoundland and Labrador does not join Canada for many years after Confederation. So up until 1949, literally Newfoundland was its own, still a colony, and like we learned earlier, still heavily connected to Britain. Okay. After the Great Depression in the 1930s, the world economy had collapsed, and people were most economies were depressed. the colonists all lost their job, and then World War II started and the colony went bankrupt. Okay, in response, this means after the war, Britain had technically won the war, but it cost them a lot, and in the end, they were looking to get rid of their colonies throughout the world, not just in Newfoundland, but around the world. They were getting rid of their colonies, and so they were cutting ties, and so they cut ties with Newfoundland. And so this meant that Newfoundland needed to look towards Canada to hopefully grow its economy. So in 1948, the people voted. They had a referendum to see. Actually, they had 2 referendums, and only on the second referendum did they narrowly vote to join Confederation. Okay, even though in the long term, this was a great idea because, because the people of Newfoundland benefit a lot from being a part of Canada.
So on the very last slide, just giving you guys like an overview of when the provinces joined and at the same time when the territories joined. So obviously the first in 1867, Northwest Territories joined the same time Manitoba did. The Northwest Territories is the purple part of this map here. Then the Yukon joined in 1898, so being where the gold rush was happening and right next to Alaska, which is owned by the United States at this point. And then the very last one, and this is the last one to actually ever join, was Nunavut in 1999, so it's actually only been a territory or a part of Canada for the last 21 years. So all this part where nobody goes, and then we talked last time that Mr. Yeoman really wants to go to Alert Canada.
Pretty far north.
Yeah, so that's it. That's all for this video, guys. So then we will catch up on the second part in part 2 when we talk about the CPR or the